Yo, before the intro rocks, give this podcast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, as well as stream it on Spotify. If you're listening from YouTube through the Barhire channel, make sure you like and comment on the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to not only stay tuned to my content, but plenty of other top-notch material. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Most Wanted Podcast and Twitter at Most Wanted Pod, and as always, feedback is greatly appreciated. Yo guys, really quickly before the podcast starts, the audio might just sound a little bit different than how it usually is. I'm recording in the basement of my family restaurant, so if you hear, pipes running with water or, pots clashing or clanging, that's the main reason why. So audio quality was a little bit, shittier than it usually is. Normally it's, decent quality, but next episode I'll get it better, but today it's just the way it is, so sorry about that, but hope you guys enjoy.
How should I start it? You like jazz?
What's good with y'all, man? Welcome back to another episode of the Most Wanted Podcast, where nothing's safe from discussion. For this episode, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to review something that I really want to talk about. Mainly like a movie. I kind of want to do that more often with this podcast. Review things such as movies or music that comes out or anime that I really enjoy, as well as talk about things that I really want to talk about. Just shit that goes on in my life and whatever. For this episode, I really want to talk about the movie Soul. I remember hearing all the hype about it when it was first announced. I think early or late 2019 to 2020. It came out literally, I think, Boxing Day on Disney Plus, and I was really anticipating it. And there was a whole meme about it as well, whereas there was a whole trend of Pixar talking about, well, what if this had feelings? What if this had feelings? Like for example, what if toys had feelings? That would be the Toy Story movies. Or what if feelings had feelings? Then that would be the Inside Out movie. And now it's like, what if black people have feelings? Which is, the movie Soul. That was a whole meme about it. And I really wanted to call this episode, What If Niggas Had Feelings? But you can't really, put niggas as part of a YouTube title. I mean, I guess you could, niggas in Paris or whatever. But whatever, I'm too lazy to do that. Anyways. I really want to talk about this movie because it really hit me personally. And I feel like the way I saw it, it was pretty, I don't want to say inspirational, but eye-opening. And so I'm going to first read the synopsis of the movie just because I'm way too lazy to write down actual notes for when I'm watching a movie. I hate doing that because it always takes away my attention from the movie itself. So I'm going to read you guys the synopsis. And then I'm going to give you guys my interpretation of, the movie, what I think about it, what I feel about it, maybe what it could have done better, maybe what I think are its strengths and weaknesses, so on and so forth. Main reason why is because, I hated doing that as a kid, especially when, remember when they used to do that in class where it's like, all right, guys, this is social, where I'm going to put on this movie about the Civil War, and you guys have to make sure you write down notes. There's going to be a quiz about it. It was the most bullshit thing ever. I'd rather just watch the movie and enjoy it for the sake of enjoyment. And then form my own opinions about it later. So, okay, here's the synopsis from Wikipedia, and then I'll give you guys my opinion. Joe Gardner, a middle school music teacher from New York City, dreams of a career in jazz, even though his mother Liba, wow, my bad. Even though his mother Liba objects to it, fearing for his financial security. One day, Joe learns of an opening in the band of jazz legend Dorothea Williams and auditions for it. Impressed with Joe's piano playing, Dorothea offers him a chance to perform later that night. As Joe happily heads off to prepare for the show, he falls down a manhole. Damn, my nigga, that's tough. You gotta watch where you walk in, my nigga. Nigga walked through construction zones, banana peels constantly, and then he dies by a fucking manhole. That's just tough in my opinion. Damn. Joe finds himself as a soul heading into the great beyond, which is pretty much Disney and Pixar's term for the afterlife. Unwilling to die before his big break, he tries to escape but ends up in the great before, where soul counselors, all named Jerry, prepare unborn souls for life. Each soul has a badge which, once filled out with traits, grants passage to Earth. Mistaken for an instructor, Joe is assigned to train 22, a cynical soul who has remained in the great before for millennia and sees no point in living in Earth. She needs to find her spark to complete her badge and agrees to give it to Joe so that he can return home. Joe tries to assist 22 in finding a passion, but the attempts prove futile. With no other options, they head for the Zone, an area people enter where their passion sets them into a euphoric trance. It also houses the lost souls who become obsessed and broken. Moonwind, the captain of a psychedelic galleon bearing the troop of Mystics Without Borders, helps rescue the lost souls. The Mystics agree to help Joe, who has been in a coma since his fall. Joe excitedly hops back to Earth, but accidentally brings 22 along, resulting in 22 entering his body, and Joe ending up in a therapy cat. Damn, my nigga, you 0 for 2. How you gonna fall in a manhole for dying, and then when you come back, you in a motherfucking pussy, nigga? That is tough. That is tough. You are 0 for 2. Initially frightened, 22 settles into Joe's body and finds great enjoyment in the little things in life. She holds deep and poignant conversations with Connie, a student who plans to quit the school band but who changes her mind after losing herself in a passionate, impromptu trombone solo, Dez, who wanted to become a veterinarian but is now enjoying his career as a barber, and Liba, who reconciles with Joe and finally accepts her son's passion for music. Meanwhile, Terry, an accountant designated to counting souls headed for the great beyond, goes to Earth to look for the missing Joe. 22 and Joe find Moonwind at his day job as a science whirler, because that's where you can find all the psychedelics, you could say, to help restore Joe to his body. But 22 experiences an epiphany and decides that she must find her purpose on Earth. She flees with Joe tailing behind, but Terry catches up and brings both of them back to the great before. 22 realizes that her badge had been filled out, yet Joe insists that it was a result of his experiences and tastes. 22 angrily tosses the badge at him and disappears into the zone, and through that Joe later learns that instead of a life's purpose, a spark simply means that a soul is ready to live. Joe heads back to Earth and has a successful performance with the Dorothea Quartet. The experience, however, is not as fulfilling as Joe expected. Worse, he might have to repeat the same routine night after night. Realizing his senseless and selfish ways with 22, he decides to return the badge. Inspired by the objects she collected while in his body, Joe plays the piano to enter the zone and look for 22, who had become a lost soul. Using a small maple seed 22 had kept, Joe convinces her that she is ready to live, returning her to normal. With her badge back, 22 finally enters Earth, with Joe accompanying her for as long as he can. As he prepares to head into the great beyond, Joe is stopped by a Jerry, who thanks him for inspiring them and offers him another chance at life. Joe accepts and returns to his body on Earth, now ready to live and appreciate every moment in life. So that shit was kind of heavy as a explanation, but things that I want to talk about first off. First off, I want to say animation and artwork, beautiful. Pixar legitimately has never fucking missed when it comes to animating shit like this. Like, movement, animation, facial features, everything is unique, everything is, like, flawless. Like, for example, you look at Cyberpunk 2077, where they literally modeled kids. Like, all they did was shrink down the adult version, like, adult models, and then shrink them. So they're pretty much just midgets. Or, I don't know if that's offensive or not, but, small people. I don't know if that's offensive. Fuck! I don't know if that's offensive either. But like what they did was pretty much shrink down the adult models and then put them down into child forms, which it really threw people off. Cyberpunk is a whole other situation. But what they did with Soul, they made it so that each person that was shown in the movie stood out in their own respective ways, whether it be through their voice. First of all, voice acting as well. Jamie Foxx killed it in this movie. I swear, this nigga Jamie Foxx has never fucking missed once. Like, this man is so talented. Like, this man can sing his ass off. He can dance. This motherfucker can act. This motherfucker is funny as hell. And as far as I know, this guy is like a general, like, wholesome being. Like, this, I don't even think he's gotten into any major controversy. Like, he's just an overall great guy. Another thing that I've noticed in the movie, well, first of all, let me get back to my initial point. The animation, like, voice acting, which plays a huge role into something as, like, an animated movie, it's so key. And him really bringing in the emotion, him and Tina Fey voicing 22, his side, not necessarily side character, but the second protagonist. It really brought, like, they really had, like, good chemistry in terms of voice acting. Like, they're back and forth. The script was very funny. Like, you know, the comedy wasn't really cringeworthy. It was pretty good. But a big thing that I would say, you know, as a nigga, seeing other niggas in an animated movie where you don't really see them on the big screen, it really brings, you know, a smile to your face. I've seen a whole lot of not a whole lot, but I've seen criticism online talking about how there wasn't a whole lot of representation of black culture. To give context to this, I think Pixar's last work was the movie Coco. And that was all about Mexican culture, about Dias de los Muertos. Got the accent. Which is pretty much, you know, the Day of the Dead. And it was all about, you know, family. And it was all about Mexican culture, of course. And when we saw, you know, Joe in the trailers and stuff, we all assumed, okay, so we're probably going to get a movie with a whole lot of black representation and black culture. And it's there, but it's there in a much more subtle way. Like, you can tell the culture is there, but it's in a much more subtle way. Like, for example, the barbershop scene where 22 inside of Joe's body and Joe inside of the body of the therapy cat, they go to the barbershop, Dez's barbershop. Like, it, first of all, body proportions as well. Everyone is unique. They look like niggas. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but like hair texture, facial features, their hands, like literally everything was on point as a nigga. Now, it may not seem like a whole lot of, like, a big deal for most people, but for people in the black community, it is a big deal because a lot of, you know, black characters have been misrepresented in media in general. Well, not in general, but, like, you know, for the most part. A big thing that I can remember is in Dragon Ball, or Dragon Ball Z, character by the name of Mr. Popo. I don't even know, well, apparently he's supposed to be a genie, but he clearly looks like a bad representation of, like, you know, Jim Crow laws. Like, how, you know how Jim Crow used to look with, you know, exaggerated, you know, big lips, red lips, pitch black skin. Another example I could probably say off the top of my head would probably be Jinx, like, you know, the Pokemon Jinx. Now, I know it's not actually like a real person, but you can clearly tell that that's based off of the stereotype of Jim Crow, just, you know, a female version. But, you know, things that I've seen done right in terms of black people in terms of, you know, modern day media. Boondocks is the Boondocks, nigga. Like, it's a show full of niggas. If they didn't get that shit right, I'd actually be vexed. But Naruto Shippuden, like, what's it called? The Village Hidden in the Clouds, literally full of niggas. And everyone looks unique. Everyone, you know, skin tone, facial features actually look normal. And they look cold as hell. Shout out my nigga Killer B still. That nigga cold as a bitch, bro. Anyways, but going back from that to my main point, you can tell that the animators put a lot of time and effort into it, into making sure that each person felt like their own vibrant being and their own person. And in terms of black culture, if it was pointed out in a very not obnoxious, but more so like prevalent way in the movie itself, I feel like it would more so hinder the movie rather than actually push it up even higher. Like, would it be great for representation? Of course it would. Like, I do remember the movie's actually pretty good in representation as well, just based off what I remember. When Joe initially died and was on the conveyor belt to the great beyond, I remember there was an Inuit lady there who was speaking an actual, you know, native tongue. I remember a Korean lady that was speaking her native tongue on the conveyor belt, which makes sense because this is, like, for all walks of life, this is, you know, the end point which would make sense. But, it's like those small little details that you notice that really bring this movie all together. But I feel like if black culture was really more prevalent in the main story, I feel like it would hinder it, where the whole point of the story would be lost. Whereas, say for example, in Coco, the whole point of that movie was about family and coming together. And the Mexican culture and that specific occasion of Dias de los Muertos, that lends specifically to that occasion, to that theme, which makes perfect sense. But in this situation, it makes it a lot more subtle, especially with the whole landscape of New York City. First of all, they made New York look incredible as well. I haven't even talked about the main story yet. I'm just talking about what I've seen, like, off rip, like just facial features. It is, well, I've never been to New York, but based off of stories that I've heard from my friend, from my sister who's been to New York a couple times, they described it to a T of what it is. Everything is lively. You gotta keep moving. It's a hustle city. Everything is moving all at once. It just feels alive, and so it just works perfectly all together to convey that single image at the end. But now going into the story, finally, you see Joe. Joe is a guy who's pretty much been down bad for most of his adult life, and he thinks that going to get that one gig in jazz is his one way out. It's like his one ticket. Kind of like how niggas in the hood. I don't want to compare them because obviously they're different. They're different scenarios, but I feel like the sentiment is the same. I hope you guys understand what I mean. But where like niggas in the hood, where they're like, yo, I'm gonna get his sports scholarship. Like, if you compare it to like people in the NBA, people have said, like, I remember hearing LeBron saying, he was it was a really tough community in Akron, and he said that basketball was like his one ticket out. It was like his way to vent. It was one way to really be himself, and that's what he really wanted to focus on. Pretty much an obsession for it, and ultimately he got it. And the same ways with Joe, but different from LeBron is where he didn't get it until he got that gig with Dorothea Williams, and so he keeps on trying and trying and trying. And it really shows tunnel vision, where he kind of forgets about everything going on in life. Like, for example, when he died initially, and he's on the conveyor belt, realizing the situation that he's in, and he's like, wait a minute, no, 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 I did not just die, not when my life just started. He's already, as I can tell, in his, mid 40s at this point. Or probably late 30s, in his 40s, pretty much. And he's saying right when his life just started. To me, that shows how he's been focused on, jazz being his one ticket for his entire life, to the point where he's forgotten everything else that comes with life. Like, I remember there was a scene in which 22 and Joe were trying to escape from the hospital after, the whole switcheroo in the bodies. And 22 was going through Joe's memories, and she's saying, oh, all you have is jazz, jazz, jazz. Oh, and a girl named Lisa. And I remember Joe saying at one point, he talked about, well, I wouldn't have enough time for her because of jazz. He's pretty much neglecting his own life for the sake of jazz. And you notice that, and you're like, well, I mean, you can always try and find a work-life balance, right? But Joe ultimately doesn't see that, because he's thinking once he gets through jazz, then he can go, he'll go big time, then he'll make the money, then he'll be secure for life. And it's really a sight to see when he finally realizes his mistakes. Like, for example, after he does the gig with Dorothea Williams, and he feels like, yeah, I did it and it felt great, but that's it? There's nothing else, nothing more to it. There's no greater euphoria that I feel. And Dorothea Williams gives him an analogy. Now, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it exactly, but I think she said 2 fish are swimming in water, and one fish says to the other fish, hey, where are we right now? Because I'm trying to find the ocean. The other fish says, the ocean? Well, you're in it. And the first fish then says, the ocean? This is water. I'm looking for the ocean. But what the fish doesn't realize is that he's already been in that state the entire time without knowing it. He's just been in that one small tunnel vision goal where he's kind of neglected to see everything else around him. which Joe realizes when he gets back to his apartment and starts playing the piano, finding inspiration from the things 22 picked up in life while she was in his body. And you see it. And then you go through Joe's memories and you see him realize where he started to go wrong. You can see how Joe neglected everything else in life due to that one focus in wanting to become a jazz musician. Having a passion is always something that is great, and that is always something that you should strive to have and strive to keep. But the problem is, once it becomes an obsession, it clouds your mind to everything else in life. Of course, actually, it's not necessarily bad in having an obsession as well, as long as you maintain it to be healthy. Like, I keep on comparing it to basketball players, but I remember when Kevin Durant won his first title in 2017 with Golden State, and I remember him having an interview about it. I think probably in his second year with Golden State, and he was saying, "Yeah, I mean, we won and it felt great," because this was after almost 10 years of him trying to win, and he finally won, and he's like, "Yeah, it feels great and everything. I love it, but is that it? I expected there to be more, you know?" And that's exactly the thing that I thought of the moment Joe was thinking about, is that it? And Joe was, in the subway thinking, now I have to go back and do it all over again. And eventually you'll burn out and you'll lose the love that you once had. And that obsession will just disappear. Then you'll be left with nothing. Especially when you had tunnel vision for your entire life. Or your adult life in Joe's case. And so, he realizes that. And he realizes how fucked up he really was. Where he realizes, okay, maybe jazz should not be my whole life. I remember him trying to convince Dorothea Williams to get him back on the gig before, gig at the night. And he's saying, jazz is the only thing I live for. If I can't be this jazz musician, then I'm nothing. I have nothing. And he doesn't realize it then, but he probably realized it afterwards, where he'd be empty without jazz. There's nothing left in him besides jazz. Of course, he still has his mother. He still has, his mother's friends. I'm assuming at this point, they're practically his aunts. But he doesn't have anything else besides that. And so he realizes that maybe jazz should not be everything in life. And that's what, for me personally, that's where I kind of resonated with that. Not because I find any one particular thing to be an obsession. I think about everything. I don't think about everything. That's pretty stupid. But when I focus on something, I'm talking about me, myself. When I focus on something that I enjoy, it becomes an obsession for me. And I work on it, and I work on it. But then I burn out. And then I find no more motivation for it. Like, for example, I remember probably about first year university, so about 2 years ago, I wanted to do music reviews, like music reviews for albums, shit like that, because I wanted to expand. But the problem was that, in my opinion, it felt too restrictive. And when I was trying to, set up everything, I had outline, I had everything set up. But the problem was, when I was trying to put that all together, I started having tunnel vision, where I was focusing more and more on one singular thing, just try and get the next one done. Ultimately, I never really posted any reviews. I don't know how to delete Instagram pages now, but at the same time, even when I was trying to figure everything out, I kind of realized not only did that feel restrictive, because the way I work is that, well, the way I notice how I work myself is that I hate being restricted by going only by one way. If I can find doing multiple ways to find, let me figure out how to say this properly. The way I work is where I want to be able to do, I want to be flexible with what I want to do. That's proper way of saying it. I want to be flexible in what I want to do. But the problem was, if I wanted to expand from just that music thing, then that'd be even more of a hassle, and then I'd have to start, spreading out more and more, and that'd be too much of a hassle. So ultimately, I felt restricted and bounded down, saying, okay, let me just work on the music. Music reviews. There's no way I'm a rapper or a singer. My voice is obviously cracking, as you can tell by the previous episodes. But even then, that's why I kind of decided on going with the podcast instead, which you guys are listening to now, surprisingly, which I appreciate. But doing a podcast, it helps you look at everything from not just a specific thing. Like, I remember listening to one of my guys, his name is Godwin. He runs the Everything Goes podcast, and he had a guest on there. I think his name was Marco. And he felt burnt out because he kept on talking about, the same subject every so often. And I felt, that's what was happening to me in the past. And ultimately, that's pretty much what was happening to Joe as well. And going through that same monotony over and over, day in and day out, with the jazz recital, which is what he noticed on his train ride home. He noticed I would have to go do the same thing tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And ultimately, it just bears you down and down to the point where you just lose enjoyment in it. And so it's just, ultimately, you kind of have to realize, okay, maybe take a breather. Realize where you are in your situation right now, and ultimately focus on yourself. Not necessarily focus on yourself, but more so appreciate the things that are in life now. Find someone that you want to talk to, have a relationship, go out with your friends. Obviously not right now because, COVID, but you get the general gist. Stay with your family more, appreciate the time that you have with loved ones because ultimately you could go at any day, at any time. Like, for example, just how Joe did. He had the best day of his life at that point when he finally got the gig, and he died that same day. It can happen to anyone. And so that's why he felt like he never accomplished anything, because he had such a tunnel vision that he never really stopped to smell the flowers. I think that's the term. He never stopped to smell the flowers, appreciate, nature, hanging out with friends. His previous relationship with Lisa, he said that he cut that off, I believe, due to him trying to focus more so on music. But he never really found that ultimate work-life balance. So in my opinion, this whole movie is about balance. It's all about finding yourself and what makes you, like what makes you work. It's all about self-inflection. And so, in my opinion, anyone could watch this and go away with their own different opinion about themselves. Like, in my opinion, after I finished watching this movie, I couldn't stop thinking about it, to be honest. It was just something that was on my mind constantly. And it was just, ultimately, it really just, I don't want to say changed me, because I would say it helped me change my outlook on life just by a little bit. You never need anything that'll change your life in a major way, because that's probably something like a major event that'll change your life in a major way. But it's always those small increments that'll help you change for the better. It's just, and another thing that I noticed about, sorry if it's all, all over the place. This is the first time I've ever done an actual review for a movie, so take it for what you will. But this is just how raw it is. I hate writing down notes. I hate writing down a script. I tried doing that once. Shit is ass. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Reading lines, I have no problem. But writing them down, I can't. But another thing that I appreciated was really the lack of a love interest, to be honest. I know I mentioned that as like a point for Joe that he kind of glossed over it due to his tunnel vision, but in my opinion, having a love interest always is like, it's like a cliche that you can see, as well as not necessarily focusing on a person's backstory and oh, here's their whole backstory for half an hour, and then here's the rest of the movie. More so talking about the structure of the film right at this point, but I appreciated how it was going, where Joe had already lived his life up to that point, but his past is hinted to him, or it's hinted to us, the audience, where it was hinted that his dad was a struggling musician himself, and that their mother's clothing store was the one that paid the bills growing up, which is why they had the mother and the main character Joe had that very deep and compelling conversation about Joe really wanted to pursue his possible career in music, but his mother wanted to stop that and focus on a more concrete path, being that band teacher. That was his main job. And so once they reconciled that, it was, I don't know, the structure itself was just very concise for me. And then when they had Joe experience that flashback while he was playing the piano in his apartment, where he remembered getting a bath with his mom as a kid, his dad, showing him a record, taking him to that first jazz recital, or not. Why do I keep on saying recital as if it's some grade 7 performance? Jazz performance, like a gig. Him riding a bike when he was a teenager, and him appreciating life. The whole point of the movie is about appreciating life and where you are at the moment. I know I haven't talked much about 22, but that's mainly because 22 was there to help Joe achieve this. 22 was a character in where she has been told multiple times throughout thousands of years that she would never be able to find her purpose. She would never be able to find, because that's what she thought that spark was. She thought that the spark was supposed to be the reason for her to live. But in reality, the spark is just a signal for when you're ready to come live. That everything that's in the Hall of Everything, or showing anything that's in, the, what's it called? The Hall of You, I think I said it was called. It's just meant to show that you could find your reason to live at any point. Literally at any point, you can find your reason to live when you're on board. But what you want to be in life, you figure that out while you're living. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but we're rolling with it right now. But ultimately, this movie really did, speak out to me, and it was about, well, okay, let me finish about 22. But 22 was, in a lack of a better term, she was down bad, pretty much, where she was kept being hit with negative thoughts saying, I can't do this, there's no way, I'm not good enough, which is what you see a lot of people who go through mental illness, or people who are struggling or coping with things, they tend to say, where it's like, I'm not good enough, I've never been good enough, I don't know if I can do this, I can't do this, things of that nature. And ultimately it's up to friends and family to help them, but it's also up to themselves to kind of realign themselves back to probably their life. Pretty sure that didn't make sense either, but I keep on saying that, but that's just the way it goes here. But yeah, ultimately this movie really did hit me at 4 p.m. while I was wearing my PJs. Literally woke up watching it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because it made me want to start doing things for the better. It made me want to stop focusing on one singular thing, or just saying, oh man, I'll just put it off for another day, because who knows, you could go the next day. Like you could end up in that conveyor belt yourself. You never know. So the whole point of the movie is just to take a deep breath, relax, take everything a day at a time. Once you can stop to smell the flowers, take a walk, appreciate life, the life that you have. It may not be the best life. You could be in a very horrible situation, but you still have that life. You are still alive. Someone cares for you. Someone can care for you. Someone will care for you. And all you can do is just keep moving forward. Wow, that kind of took a very deep turn, but all you can really do is just, walk forward, breathe in, breathe out, appreciate everything that's around you, because it could go any day. And yeah, I definitely rate this movie a 9 out of 10. But hey, thank y'all for making it to the end of the episode. If you want to show love to the podcast, follow me on both Instagram at Most Wanted Podcast and Twitter at Most Wanted Pod to stay up to date on guest features, upload days, and more. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you give a 5-star review and rating. You can also listen to the podcast on Spotify as well as on YouTube through the Broadhive channel, where you can not only find my podcast, but you can also find plenty of other top-notch material. Until next time, we out. Easy, y'all.